today what we are going to be doing is we're going to be working on something called simplest form. Now there's a certain way we have to write the answers when we are working with fractions. And we have to write it in something called simplest form. What that means is that the numerator and the denominator have no common factor other than 1. So if we look, this anchor chart is titled Simplifying or Reducing Fractions. We see the base word simple in simplifying and in simplest form. That means simple means easy, or it means not much to it. When we're putting fractions in simplest form, we're making sure the numerator and the denominator have no common factors other than 1. So, to simplify fractions, we're going to go through a quick little breakdown and then we're going to go more in depth. Step 1 is to find the greatest common factor of the numerator and the denominator. Now this is why we spent so much time on fractions and multiples, factors and multiples, and prime and composite numbers. Because remember when I told you that we're going to have a lesson where you have to list every single factor for the numerator and the denominator? Well, that's where we are. So first, in order to find the greatest common factor, you have to take your fraction 3/12 and you have to find all of the factors of the numerator and all of the factors of the denominator. That's why you must list them all. None of you got practice with this because you refused to do the work, to take the time, even though I showed you exactly how to do it. So pretty much none of you have practice with this. So this lesson's going to take you a long time. That's how it is when you choose not to do the work in the first place. So, first we list the factors of 3. Luckily 3 is a prime number. The only factors are 1 and 3. Then we list the factors of 12. So we have our factor rainbowing to find that the factors of 12 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. We're going to go through and we're going to underline all the common factors. Common means they have something in common. They have something that's the same. Well, 1, they both have a factor of 1, and they both have a factor of 3. Greatest common factor means what is the biggest factor that they have in common? Well, it's 3. 3 is the greatest common factor. So there's step 1. We just found the greatest common factor. Now sometimes that'll be real quick, like this, because we have one prime number. Sometimes you might have a fraction like this, where there's a lot more factors for each number. So step 2, we divide the numerator and the denominator. I want you to put the word each and a caret between denominator and by. So put the word each and a caret between the words denominator and by, because we divide the numerator and the denominator each by the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor of 3 and 12 is 3. So that means we're going to take 3/12. We're going to divide 3 by 3, the numerators, and the denominators 12 by 3. 3 divided by 3 is what class? 1. 12 divided by 4 is what class? 4. Whenever we have a 1 as the numerator, the fraction is already in simplest form. Because, remember, to get simplest form, the numerator and the denominator have no factors other than 1 in common. How many factors of 1 are there? Carla?
A lot.
How many factors of 1 are there? Lena? 1. What is that 1 factor? 1. So if there's a 1 in the numerator spot, it's already in simplest form. That's just how it is. And if we look, we can see that they're equivalent. 3/12 and 1/4 take up the same amount of space, but 1/4 is in simplest form. When you work with fractions and you give an answer through the rest of your life using fractions, The answer has to be in simplest form. If it is not in simplest form, you are not correct. Even if what you give is an equivalent fraction, if it's not simplest form, you're not correct. Now I have a feeling that this lesson, when I grade the homework, it's just not gonna be good because you guys don't like to make sure that you're following the steps and that you're doing things correctly. Hopefully you'll prove me wrong though. I hope you will prove me wrong. I hope that I will get to this homework and I'll be like, wow, they did actually make sure that they did what they were supposed to do. Because for every single fraction, I need to see this. Factors of 3, factors of 12, and then a list with all of the factors listed for every single fraction. We'll see what that looks like when we get to it. Okay. Lena, please read the sentences under the title.
The fraction is in simplest form. When its numerator and denominator have no common factor than other factor than 1, the simplest form of a fraction.
Go slow. Start again, please, but go slow.
The simplest form of a fraction is the equivalent to the fraction.
So, when we look at a fraction like 1/4, that is in simplest form because when we list the factors of 1 and 4, so you should be doing this, what are the factors of 1? Cullen? 1. What are the factors of 4? Smith?
1, 2, and 4.
1, 2, and 4. What are the common factors? That means what do they have in common? What factors do both numbers have? Michaela? 1. They only have 1 in common. That means 1/4 is in simplest form. Also, we have that helpful hint. If the numerator is 1, it's in simplest form. So, everybody, finger our pencil on example 1 so that we can see exactly how to do this. Okay, read in your head while I read out loud. Every period, we're going to pause and we're going to visualize. There are 12 ingredients in a bread recipe, okay? So I'm imagining that I'm making bread and I'm going to end up with, I have to get 12 things out of my pantry or my refrigerator in order to make this. Things like eggs, flour, yeast, sugar, salt, baking powder, and so on until I have 12 of those things. Milk, water, eggs, cinnamon, and raisins. And, I don't know, one more thing. Can't think of it. There's 12 ingredients. Some chocolate, sure. There's 12 ingredients. Esteban needs to buy 8 out of 12, or 8/12 of the ingredients. So that means he has some of them, but he still needs to buy 8 more. Remember, 8 ingredients out of the 12 total ingredients is equivalent to 8/12. 8 out of 12. You can imagine fractions as numerator out of denominator. But when we say them out loud, we say 8/12, not 8 out of 12. Write 8/12 in simplest form. Okay, so that means we have to take 8/12 and we have to figure out what it equals so that this numerator and this denominator only have 1 in common, like 1/4. So in order to do that, please read these sentences under example 1. Michaela, loud and slow.
To write a fraction in
Louder.
To write a fraction in simplest form, divide both the numbers,
No.
the numerator and the denominator, by the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor is the greatest of the common factors of 2 or more numbers.
So, the greatest common factor is the greatest, or largest, of the common factors of 2 or more numbers. And so, to figure out 8/12 in simplest form, form, we're going to have to divide the numerator and the denominator each by something to get the fraction in simplest form. Can these numbers that we divide by be different? Can the numbers that we divide, the numerator and the denominator by, be different? Zari.
No.
No, they have to be the same. So what we need to do is first we need to list the factors of our numerator, and then we're going to list the factors of our denominator. We're going to figure out what factors they have in common, and then circle the largest of those. So luckily they did this for you. However, you will have to do it yourself for pretty much the rest of the lesson. So the factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. Because we know the factor pairs are 1 and 8, and 2 and 4. Now the factors of 12 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. Because we know the factor pairs are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Now, we have to figure out, okay, what are the factors that they have in common? So we start at the beginning. Well, definitely 1, 2. Well, 12 has 3, but 8 doesn't, so we're going to skip that. 4. 12 has 6, but 8 doesn't. 8 has 8, but 12 doesn't. And 12 has 12, but 8 doesn't. So the common factors, the ones they have in common, they both share, are 1, 2, and 4. Now we have to circle the greatest. Which one is greatest? 1, 2, or 4? Class?
4.
4. So now, step 2 is we're going to divide by the greatest common factor. So the numerator divided by 4 and the denominator divided by 4. Class, 8 divided by 4 is?
2.
12 divided by 4 is?
3.
So that means if we divide the numerator and the denominator each by 4, we get 2 thirds. So 8/12 in simplest form is?
2 thirds.
2 thirds. Now, once you get to the division part, it's going to be all basic facts. The part that's going to take the most time and that you have to be the most careful with is finding the factors. Because if you don't list all the factors and you forget that 4 is a factor of 12 and you weren't careful, then you're going to say the greatest common factor is 2. Is the greatest common factor of 8 and 12 2? If I were to do that, don't do this. But if I were to say, because I did not pay attention and I did not make sure to list all the factors, and I said that the greatest common factor was 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Oh, there it is. But then if I list the factors of 4 and 6, I know the factors of 4 are 1, 2, and 4. The factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. Do they have only 1 in common? What else do they have in common? Carla,
They have 2 and 1.
they have 2 in common. The definition of simplest form is when its numerator and denominator have no common factor other than 1. So if I said 8/12 in simplest form was 4/6, would I be right? No. That is why you have to make sure that you are being careful in listing every single factor. Because even if you are not careful and you don't list every single factor, but you do happen to list the greatest common factor, I'm still going to count off. Because you did not list every factor. Because you're not being careful, you're rushing, you're showing me that you don't care about your work. Well, if you don't care about your work in 4th grade, you're not going to care about your work in 5th grade, and those middle school teachers don't want to deal with people who don't care about their work. They don't. They're not going to give you the chances and the tips and the tricks that I give you, because they're going to expect you to listen the first time. So if you show me in 4th grade that you don't care about your work, Well, I have to tell the 5th grade teachers, this person doesn't care about their work. That's just how it is. Okay, so let's move on to example 2. Helper number 1. So at the top it says to write a fraction in simplest form, you can also divide by common factors. We already know that. So everybody, finger pencil on example 2. Read in your head while I read out loud. A newborn koala is 6/8 of an inch long. So I'm imagining a teeny, teeny, tiny little baby koala. It's not even a full inch. It's like 6/8 of an inch long. Write the fraction in simplest form. So, step 1, write the fraction. Step 2 is to divide by common factors. But before we can do that, first we have to find out what are the common factors and what is the greatest common factor. So, I'm going to list the factors of 6 and the factors of 8. Smith, what's the first factor of 6?
1.
1. Which matches or which goes with?
6.
6. There's my first layer of the rainbow. 6 is even, which means what is a factor of 6?
2.
2. 2 is a factor pair with
3.
3. Now we've met in the middle, right? There's no numbers between 2 and 3, so we can stop, right? Let's do the same thing with 8. Zadie, what's the first factor of 8?
1.
1. 1 is a factor pair with
8.
8. 8 is even, so what is a factor?
2.
2. And 2 is a factor pair with
4.
4. Now we need to think of 3. That would be basic facts, right? Is there a basic fact with 3 that equals 8?
No.
No. So what are the factors of 8, Zadie?
2. 1, 2, 4, 8.
1, 2, 4, and 8. Smith, I forgot to ask you, what are the factors of 6?
1, 2, 3, and 6.
1, 2, 3, and 6. So now we need to go through and we're going to underline the common factors. Well, they both have 1. They both have 2. 6 has 3, but 8 doesn't. 8 has 4, but 3 doesn't. 6 has 6, but 8 doesn't. 8 has 8, but 6 doesn't. So the common factors are 1 and 2. What's the greatest common factor, class?
2.
2. So we're going to circle the greatest common factor. Now that we've found the greatest common factor, we can do the easy part. We're going to divide the numerator and the denominator each by 2. The numerator, 6 divided by 2 is 8 divided by 2. The denominator, 8 divided by 2 is
4.
Now let's think of 3 and 4. Factors of 3. Actually, Aaron, factors of 3. Factors of 4. What are the common factors, Aaron? So is 3/4 in simplest form? Yes. So 6/8 simplifies to what, class?
3, 4.
Class, 6/8 simplifies to
3, 4.
3/4.
3/4.
So a newborn koala is, class,
3/4 inches long.
3/4.
3/4 inches long.
3/4 of an inch long. So I know that we don't see of and between, but you can imagine when you have a fraction and then a unit after, you can imagine 3/4 of an inch long. So does everybody see how to do that? Okay, we're going to do the guided practice together. This is where you will need your separate sheet of paper because you won't have enough room to neatly show all of the factoring on your paper. Okay, helper number 1, sanitize, erase, sanitize. What I show you for the guided practice, you will do for every single problem. Do you understand? That means I better see a place for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. Except you might not need 2 for 29. I better see a box for each one of those because you will be doing this factoring at least 28 times on the independent practice alone. If you had practiced with lesson 1 and 2, this wouldn't be so bad. But you didn't. Even though I told you, hey, we're going to do this again. And you still chose not to do that. So that was a choice. That was that much less practice that you got. Okay, the directions for numbers 1 through 4 say write each fraction in simplest form. If it is in simplest form, write simplest form. So we're going to start with number 1, which is 2/4. So on your separate sheet of paper, you're going to list the factors for 2 and the factors for 4. Let's go ahead and do this in a factor rainbowing way to make it a little easier on us. Colin, you're going to help me. So first, the factors of 2. What's the first factor of 2?
1,
And its factor pair is
2,
2. Now we've met in the middle, right? Is there anything between 1 and 2?
no,
No. Now let's do 4. First factor of 4,
1,
its factor pair is
4,
4 is even, so that means the second factor is
2,
2. And 2 is a factor pair with 2. We've met in the middle, right?
yes,
And we know, is 3 a factor?
no,
But did we even have to test that when we've met in the middle?
no,
No. So now, Cullen, what are the common factors of 2 and 4? I'm going to underline them.
1 and 2,
1 and 2. Notice how I didn't underline 1, 2, and then 1, 2. I underlined 1 and 1, 2 and 2. 4 is not common, right?
no,
Because 4 has 4 as a factor, but 2 doesn't. What's the greatest common factor?
2,
2. It's the largest of those 2 common factors. So now I can move back to here, and I'm going to divide my numerator and my denominator each by the greatest common factor, which is
2,
2. Now I can just write my answer down here. Cullen, 2 divided by 2 is,
1,
so there's our new numerator. 4 divided by 2 is,
2,
so there's our new denominator. Now remember the trick. If 1 is the numerator, then that fraction is automatically what? Carla?
in the simplest form,
In the simplest form. So we don't even have to test to make sure we're right. So Cullen, 2/4 in simplest form is,
is 1, 1 half,
1/2. Now let's look at number 2, 6/10. We're going to do the exact same thing. Victoria, you're going to help me. So we're going to go over to our separate sheet of paper, and we're going to list the factors for our numerator 6 and our denominator 10. Now you may want to give yourself more space than I gave myself because it will be the most helpful to do those factor rainbows. So give yourself space up top and down below to put your rainbows. So Victoria, first factor of 6.
1 and 6,
First factor of 6. 1. 1 is a factor pair with 6. 6 is even, so its second factor is 2. 2 is a factor pair with,
3,
and now we've met in the middle, because are there any numbers between 2 and 3? So what are the factors of 6?
1, 2, 3,
Let's do the same thing with 10. First factor of 10,
1,
1 is a factor pair with,
10,
10 is even, so its second factor is,
2,
2 is a factor pair with,
5,
let's think of 3. Is 3 a factor of 10? What about 4? And the reason we don't have to do division here is because we can use basic facts. because 3 times 12 is 36, which is much bigger than 10. And 4 times 12 is 48, which is even bigger. So we know if 3 or 4 were factors, they'd have a basic fact that equals that. And they don't. And now we've met in the middle. So the factors of 10 are
1, 2, 5.
1, 2, 5, and 10. What are the common factors?
1,
1,
2.
2. What's the greatest common factor?
2.
So that means we're going to take 6/10 and we're going to divide the numerator and the denominator each by the greatest common factor, which is
H is
2. 6 divided by 2.
3.
There's our new numerator. 10 divided by 2.
5.
There's our new denominator. Now another way that you can tell right away. 3 and 5 are both prime numbers, right? So if you were really good with prime numbers and you really practiced, which only like 1 or 2 of you did, then you would automatically know I don't have to test these, because if they're both prime, that means 3 has factors of 1 and 3, 5 has a factor of 1 and 5, the only factor they have in common is 1. If your numerator and your denominator are both prime numbers and they are different from each other, that means they automatically only have 1 in common. Okay, 5/6. I'm going to erase, but obviously you guys just go to the next line or go to your next space. Give yourself space up top and below for factor pairs. Yes?
Aren't we supposed to write simplest form?
Is 2/4 or 6/10 in simplest form?
Oh,
No. So why would we write simplest form if it wasn't already in simplest form? Because 2 and 4 both have 2 as a factor. So that means they have more than just 1, right? Same with 6/10. 2 is the greatest common factor, so they have more than just 1 in common. It's only in simplest form if they have only what factor in common?
no. 1.
1. So are either of these in simplest form if we were able to get them smaller?
No.
No. We're only writing simplest form if it's in simplest form. So make sure you understand what simplest form means. If you don't understand what simplest form means, then all the work we just did basically means nothing. If the numerator and the denominator have a factor in common other than 1, they are not in simplest form. Let's look at number 3. Zari, you're going to help me. We have 5/6. So Zari, what's the first factor of 5?
1.
1 is a factor pair with,
5.
okay, 5 is odd. So is 2 a factor?
No.
No. Let's try 3. Is there a basic fact with 3 that'll equal 5?
No.
What about 4?
No.
No. And now we've met in the middle. So the factors of 5 are?
1 and 5.
Now let's try 6. The first factor of 6 is?
1.
1 is a factor pair with?
6.
6 is even. So the second factor is?
2.
2 is a factor pair with?
3.
And now we've met in the middle. So the factors of 6 are?
1, 2, 3, and 6.
Good. Now hopefully you're writing these as well. Sorry. Okay, so what are the common factors of 5 and 6?
1.
1. That's it. Now are we going to divide each by 1 and then get 5/6, or do we just write something else down here? Sorry. Do we do this?
We write something else.
We don't need to do that, right? Because we know we're going to get the exact same answer. So what do we write on the line, Zari?
We write simplest form.
Simplest form. So for number 3, we are writing simplest form because the only factors they have in common are 1. Okay, number 4. Give yourself space above and below so that you can do your factor rainbowing. And Carla, you're going to help. 4?
The first factor is 4 is 1.
1. 1 is a factor pair with
4.
4. 4 is even, so the next factor is
2.
2. 2 is a factor pair with
2.
2, and we met in the middle. So factors of 4 are
1, 2, and 4.
good. Now 12, first factor of 12.
1,
1 is a factor pair with
12,
12 is even, so what's the second factor?
2,
2 is a factor pair with
5,
not 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Now, you've got to know your basic facts. You've been relying on your basic facts chart too long. Zadie?
2 times 6.
6. You've been relying on your basic facts chart too long. That's the problem. That's why I should not have done that, and I will not ever do that again. Okay. Have we met in the middle yet? We have to think. Is 3 a factor of 12? Is there a basic fact with 3 that will equal 12?
Yes.
Yes. 3 is a factor pair with basic facts. Cullen?
4.
4. Now we've met in the middle. So are there any others? Is there any number between 3 and 4, Carla?
No.
No. So the factors of 12 are,
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 4.
okay, what are the common factors?
1 and
1,
2
2, is that
and 4.
it? And 4. What's the greatest common factor?
4.
So we have to divide our numerator and our denominator, each by our greatest common factor, which is
4.
4 divided by 4 is,
1.
there's our new numerator. 12 divided by 4 is,
12 divided by 4 equals 3.
so there's our new denominator. We have 1 as a numerator, so we know it's in simplest form. 4 twelfths in simplest form is
1/3.
1/3. Okay. Look at the independent practice. Numbers 5 through 19, you're doing the same thing. Now look at 17, 18, and 19. You have 100 as a denominator. In order to find the greatest common factor, you have to list every factor of 100, which means not only am I going to see this, but you're also going to have to show some division. If you had already done this in lessons 1 and 2, it would be old. You'd be like, oh, that's easy. I can do that real quick. But because I don't think only one of you practiced that in lesson 1 and 2, now you're going to get your first practice, which is just really sad and upsetting. But it's your own fault. Because I showed you what to do, I told you what to do, and you didn't do it. You chose not to. So now you're going to have to work on it in this lesson. Okay, numbers 20 through 22, you have to figure out, what do you know? So number 20, you know both the original denominator and the new denominator. So you have to figure out, okay? First denominator divided by what will give you the second denominator? Are you going to divide the numerator by something different than the denominator? No. So for numbers 20 and 22, you're figuring out, okay, what can I divide what I know by, and then I divide it by the same thing on the other part. Number 23 through 26, you have a table that gives you the number. Now, it says, what part of a foot is each object? Well, if we know that a crayon is 3 inches, it's 3 out of how many total inches in a foot? How many inches are in a foot? Victoria? I can't hear you. 12. So that means the length of a crayon is 3/12 of an inch. But you have to figure out, is that in simplest form? So for numbers 23 through 26, I should see the original fraction. So if it's a crayon, you should have 3/12. Then on your separate sheet of paper, you're going to list the factors for 3 and 12. You're going to do the division on the separate sheet of paper because you don't have room here. And then you're going to put equals the simplified fraction on numbers 23 through 26. So numbers 23 through 26 should look like this. If it's saying crayon. Does it say crayon? It does. Okay. I'm picking something else. Marker, because we don't have marker. So if it says marker, the first thing is we're going to write what fraction the book tells us. Well, it tells us a marker is 5 inches, so that means the original is 5/12. Then on our separate sheet of paper, we're going to list the factors of 5 and the factors of 12. Factors of 5 are 1 and 5 because it's prime. Factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2, 6, 3, and 4. Common factors are 1, which means we wouldn't have to show any division, but pretend we did. That's what our line would look like. Except if it was already in simplest form, we would just write the first fraction and that's it. We wouldn't have to write the second one. Or we would write the word simplest form if the directions say for 5 through 19. So does anybody have questions about how to show work? Zadie?
Would you like us to use the same?
Yes, use the same sheet of paper for independent practice. However, for your homework, you'll use a separate sheet. Let's continue going through so you know what to do on the independent practice. Numbers 27 and 28 are word problems, so you're figuring out what's the original fraction, and then you have to do it in simplest form. Number 29 is critical thinking with numbers. You don't have to show work because you're just trying to figure out what are the clues. First clue, a numerator of 1 is automatically in simplest form. Another clue, if your numerator is a prime number and it is not a factor of your denominator, it's in simplest form. 5 is a prime number. Is 5 a factor of 6? No, so it's in simplest form. So there's another clue. Listen closely. If your numerator is a prime number and it is not a factor of your denominator, it is in simplest form. But check to make sure that it's not a factor of your denominator, because if we have 5 25ths, 5 is prime, but it's a factor of 25, so it can't be in simplest form. One more clue. If your numerator is a factor of your denominator, your numerator will be the greatest common factor. Because what's the greatest factor of 5? What's the greatest factor of 5, Lena? 5. So no matter what, can there be a higher greatest common factor than 5? If 5 is the greatest factor of 5? No. So there's some clues. First clue, if your numerator is 1, it's in simplest form. Second clue, if your numerator is prime and it is not a factor of the denominator, it's in simplest form. Third clue, if your numerator is a factor of your denominator, then your numerator is the greatest common factor. Is 1/5 in simplest form? Is 1/5 in simplest form? How do you know? See, I see a lot of hands up, and then as soon as I say how do you know, they go like this, which tells me they're just guessing. Aaron, is 1/5 in simplest form?
Yes.
Yes, and how do you know?
Because the numerator is 1.
The numerator is 1. And if the numerator is 1, you don't even have to check, it's in simplest form. So there's your 3 clues. I hope you were listening. I will repeat them one more time, and that's it. If the numerator is 1, it is in simplest form. If the numerator is prime and is not a factor of the denominator, it is prime. If the numerator is a factor of the denominator, no matter what, then the numerator is the greatest common factor. Okay. On your homework, you will have printed homework, but it looks the same. It's the same setup. Numbers 1 through 4 are exactly like 1 through 4 on the guided practice. Numbers 7 through 13 are also just like numbers 1 through 4 on the guided practice. Numbers 13 and 14 are just like numbers 27 and 28 on the independent practice, where you have a word problem, you're figuring out what fraction they're asking you for, and then you're going to put it in simplest form. Numbers 15 and 16 are vocab. Number 17 is just like numbers 20 through 22 on the independent practice. I must see this for every single problem except number 29 and 30 on the independent practice, numbers 15 and 16 and 17 on the homework, and numbers 20 through 22. Because 20 through 22 and 17, you can just figure out, okay, 10 divided by what equals 5, like in number 20, I'm going to divide 4 by the same thing. You do not have to show work this for numbers 29 and 30 because they are critical thinking, so it comes from your brain. You do not have to show work for numbers 15 and 16 on the homework because it's vocab. And you're just choosing the right word. Any questions? Okay, because we already did, because most of you followed directions and did, vocab over the weekend, we don't have to spend as much time on reading. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I'll give you 20, to do work on your independent practice. Now, it is going to take a while, especially because most of you did not practice with lesson 1 and 2. So it is going to take a while. You will not finish independent practice during school. You won't. It's going to take you longer to do your homework. However, not because it's hard, but because you just have extra steps to take, and you have to make sure that you are correct. So you need to make sure that you are putting that time and effort here and at home. Because again, if you do not show work, I'm taking off between 2 and 10 points from your final grade, which can bring you from an A all the way down to a C, from a B all the way down to a D, from a C all the way down to an F, or just land you with an F in the first place because you didn't actually show work and you didn't try. So you need to make sure that you are putting in the time and the effort. Otherwise, it's not going to go well. Okay, go ahead. If you have questions, I will come around and ask and answer individually.